Hey everyone, how's it going? Thanks so much for tuning in. In today's video, my buddy Joe and I are continuing the metal work on my wife's 69 Chevelle. If you missed the last episode, I put a link to it down in the description below. We got the entire trunk pan replaced and basically just started sinking our teeth into rebuilding the back section of the car, which is gonna require a lot of work, and this video is gonna be the biggest portion of that work. We'll be tackling the rear quarters, the tail section, and the outer wheel houses. Before we get started, I'd like to extend a huge thanks to Original Parts Group for their support with this build. They offer pretty much anything and everything that you need to restore and modify all sorts of classic GM vehicles. Down in the description below, I not only have a link to their product catalogs, but there's also links to the specific parts that we're using in this video, as well as related parts, so definitely check it out. I really appreciate it. Like I've mentioned in previous episodes, the trickiest part about restoring this particular car is the fact that it's a four-door, and four-door specific parts are sometimes harder to come by than two-door parts just because of popularity pretty much. Thankfully, there are a number of four-door parts that are shared with two-door cars, like the trunk lid and the tail section, but you can't buy four-door specific rear quarters. So we're gonna have to take two-door quarters, cut them down, and graft them on, and anything else that doesn't match up that we can't buy, we're gonna have to fabricate. So it's gonna be an interesting process, to say the least. We're also going to be paying close attention to this section of the car as well. As I've mentioned before, at some point in this car's life, it had been wrecked. This quarter has been replaced before, and we're kind of wondering if they did the same thing and taken a two-door quarter and grafting it to the four-door lines just because of where everything was cut and welded and whatnot. But this repair in some spots has actually failed, causing additional rust and whatnot, so we're just gonna cut it all out. Same thing with the other side and basically rebuild everything from scratch. So let's get to it. We're replacing the tail section first because we're actually going to be using the old quarters as a guide to make sure we get it exactly where it needs to get. So we'll get the tail section and the bracing welded to the new trunk pan. Then once we start replacing the quarters, we're actually going to use the tail section as a guide to make sure the quarters line up. So a little bit of a balancing act. So we're just starting to do the initial test fitting of the new quarter panel. Right now we just have it sitting on top of the old one, so we could basically just get a rough outline of the areas we're gonna have to section out of this and figure out what exactly we're gonna have to fabricate. It's really quite awesome to see just how many similarities there are between the two-door quarter panel and four-door quarter panel. Pretty much everything back here is identical. Where it starts to get really different is around this rear window. Here you can see the biggest difference by far is just where the body lines for the windows match up with the rear doors. So we're gonna have to cut a lot off of this area right here, but the wheel arch and everything else is spot on. This sweep right here is identical between the 2-door and the 4-door. But like I was saying earlier, the biggest difference with the 2-door is when it starts to go up the rear window, because they have 2 different types of windows. This area on the 2-door is far more dramatic in how it swoops up. The sedan is a little bit more flat, and as it goes up the C-pillar, the line changes and whatnot. So what we're going to end up doing is cutting the new sheet metal further back and blending it in with the original C-pillar. We're going to bring this area up further to match the curve of this panel. So the shape of the metal in this area is going to be a little bit different from what it was from the factory, but it's also, in my opinion, going to give it a little bit more definition in here. Something that nobody would ever notice unless I mentioned it, but it's just one of those things where you got to get creative, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We found a little bit of extra rust in between the lip of the outer wheelhouse and the old quarter, so we're cutting that out and replacing it as well. We are just about ready to wrap up the welding on the passenger side quarter panel. We still have to add some spot welds across the bottom and at the tail section right here, but other than that, it's just a matter of cleanup. Then we can go ahead and wrap up the driver's side. When you're getting into a restoration this thorough, it is just a matter of time before you run into something unexpected. And this outer wheelhouse is a prime example of that. We knew that it was pretty rotten, but it ended up being too far gone to try to repair like we did the one on the passenger side. The issue with replacing this whole outer wheelhouse is the fact that this is a major structural crossroads right here. We've got the C-pillar supports, we've got the door strikers, we've got like all of the inner like door sill stuff, like whatever you want to call it. A lot of stuff that is just not available to buy. Thankfully, it's all in good enough shape, but it's going to require some additional creativity to where we basically cut out with the plasma cutter the outer wheelhouse, and we're going to weld it back from the inside instead of trying to drill out all of the spot welds and everything, because if we pull this apart like we've been pulling everything else apart, you know, like proper, we're gonna end up doing way more harm than good and potentially damaging a lot of structural components that, again, we can't get. So by doing what we're gonna do, we're still gonna have a good quality repair without compromising any structural stuff, and it's gonna work out just fine. Everything's all cleaned up and prepped. Now we can get all the new stuff welded together. You think Crystal will be mad if we just decided to make it a two-door after all?
I think it'd be fun.
Or we can do like Hyundai does. We'll have two doors on one side and one door on this side.
Perfect.
Yeah. Here's another really good look at the rear window section so you can see just how much difference there is between a two-door and a four-door. Being that we can't get the metal to replace the window channels, we're gonna end up having to hand fabricate at least the sides and the top. I'm pretty sure I have the metal for the bottom section, but it's definitely gonna be one of the more challenging areas of the car to fix. It was really important for us to replace the entire quarter on this side just because of the repair that was done way back when. It had to have been done years and years ago because there's actually braze in certain spots and whatnot, and they didn't repair the panel like we're doing right now and butting the seams up together. There's a lot of metal that was overlapped, so we cut all of that stuff out, basically starting from fresh, so it's going to be a much higher quality repair than what was done before.
That's better.
Okay, the driver's side quarter panel is complete. I went ahead and did all of the finish welding off camera just so I can get some extra practice without the extra distractions. Joe is a lot more of an experienced body man than I am. He's been kind of showing me the ropes along the way, and I'm definitely proud of what I've been able to do so far. With this kind of stuff, it's definitely go slow and practice makes perfect. We also went ahead and threw the taillight assemblies back on, as well as the new trunk lid that I got from Original Parts Group, just so we can see how it looks so far. Nothing is actually bolted on the car. We've still got to do all of the gapping and, you know, panel adjustments and stuff like that, which we'll do throughout the process. Like I said, there's still some pretty significant repairs that have to get done, so we're not worried about that kind of stuff quite yet. That's more in the finishing stages, but it is very, very exciting to see all this come together. Despite nothing being properly aligned or bolted in place, all of the panel gaps actually line up pretty good, which is definitely going to make our lives a little easier when it comes time to doing the finishing work. I also really like how those areas at the base of the rear window ended up turning out. It's just a little bit of extra detail, having that original metal pie cut and blended into the two-door quarter. It's something that nobody would ever notice unless you're probably like a super Chevelle aficionado, but definitely a cool car show talking point. Well, everyone, that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you all enjoyed. Don't forget to leave a like down below because it really helps the videos a lot. And if you haven't subscribed already, consider doing so because, of course, there's always a lot more content where that came from. I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.